This is why you subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications. But we always deliver Oklahoma football live every week right here at the Voice of College Football. And again, typically on Friday. Needed to rearrange some schedules this week. So we appreciate you being here on a Thursday at the Voice of College Football. And again, please lock it in with the notifications. Therefore, you can track when we upload new content, but most notably when we go live. And this is for a 67th consecutive time. And the guy that makes it all happen is, of course, Jason from Last Word on College Football. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. How about yourself?
I'm good. I am doing well. And Big 12 Media Days are going on this week. And I would have to admit, aside from, there's always something that's stated that is sometimes not even football related. This is, to a certain extent, it's more conference related. That becomes the big banner headline that if you're just like, I haven't had a chance to dig into the various statements that have been made and what's been talked about, but I just saw that Mike Gundy had made a statement about why is Oklahoma and Texas included in our business meetings. So
yeah,
that's what caught my attention, and everybody else.
Yeah, no, I think that was for me as well, Mark, yesterday, that was the biggest thing that I really took away. Not just Gundy, but some of the players. Spencer Sanders was there as well. I caught bits and pieces of it. But yeah, that was, I think, the quote that made, I think, a lot of headlines, at least around here locally, and really just kind of some thoughts around just the Bedlam series not continuing. Mike Gundy basically said, yeah, it's over after these next few games, however many games it is. I guess it can be up to 3 more, right? But no more than 3. And he basically said, yeah, we're not playing them anymore. And so it was a little interesting because Oklahoma and Venables today took a very 180 route from that, and really didn't have any interest in talking about it whatsoever. Even a couple of people asked him, and he declined to comment about OU and OSU playing further and anything related to the SEC. So it seemed, I don't know, a bit odd for them to, I guess, take as hard of a stance as they were about not allowing Oklahoma and Texas to even be in any of these business meetings, and then making the point to talk about the fact that they all believe that the Bedlam game is going to go away. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I hate to say this, it almost hints at a little bit of jealousy or frustration on their side that they're, they weren't part of it, or they're not, in consideration for any other realignment type discussion. So it was just just kind of a bizarre stance for me.
I get it. If we were having a business meeting at McDonald's and 2 of our top executives were leaving and going directly to Burger King, and we were talking about our business, I can understand it. It all depends on what's being discussed in the room. Are we talking about something that's more immediate, or are we talking about something that's more of a long-range plan? And I know typical meetings, you can't say, okay, we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z for the next 13 minutes. Then we're going to talk about A, B, and C for 9 minutes. Conversations overlap and topics overlap, and you can't tell them to leave the room for 30 seconds and come back in and all of that. So it's just impractical. But Mike Gundy had that to say, and others, as you mentioned, concerning Oklahoma and Texas. To the more immediate in the 22 season, and actually beyond that, with the 2023 recruiting class being worked on as we speak, and 3 more commits coming in over the past week. What's the rundown?
Yeah, Mark, the recruiting in July has been about as hot as the weather around here for Oklahoma. They've, we've talked about this, and this is the model that the Venables in Dabo even had at Clemson, July being their best month, specifically in the summer. So it's turning out to be that way for Oklahoma as well. So as you mentioned, Mark, there's been 3 commitments since we last went live last Friday. So Caden Green was the first one, offensive lineman out of Lee Summit, Missouri, number 12 overall, top 100. I think, and the one thing about him that's interesting, it's been fairly trending towards Oklahoma for quite some time. But I think the thing that's interesting, Mark, and really I didn't even realize this until saw some discussion about this, but Caden Green is the top ranked, is the best ranked offensive lineman that Bill Bedenbaugh has ever gotten at the University of Oklahoma since he's been here. And you think about some of the guys that they've put into the NFL over the last 5-10 years, but none as quite as highly regarded from a rankings perspective as Caden Green. So that was the first edition. And then PJ Adebaware, again from Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, edge, number 12th ranked edge, top 100 overall. Again, a 4-star kid who is very, I think from everything I've seen, is athletically just completely jumps off the tape. Would be a guy at the edge position. Wouldn't be shocked to see this guy, Mark, get into potentially a 5-star conversation, but could certainly more of a high 4-star by the time that it's over. And then Logan Howland, really kind of the day after. Actually, Howland was the day before Adebaware, but then he committed, a 3-star kid out of New Jersey, number 45th ranked overall lineman in the country, offensive lineman in the country. So again, he's another 3-star, but still, when you put that together with the 2 4-stars that they got, when we first started having real conversations about what the recruiting class for this 2023 cycle looked like, we talked about Oklahoma in the back half of the 40s, early, maybe even the low 50s in terms of what this recruiting class is. And as of now, I believe I checked earlier today, number 11th ranked in the country. And so, and then July is still going to get, I believe it's going to get better, continue to get better for Oklahoma. There's a few, possibilities that they have still committing, later throughout the rest of this month.
We've got Sooner Born letting us know that the running back out of, and I believe Smothers is the running back out of Charlotte, correct?
Yeah.
That he is expected to announce soon. According to Sooner Born, it's going to be while we're on, so we'll have to be looking out for that.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'll have to look while we're talking. I can't remember if it was 3:30. I think it was. Yeah, I think he's right. I think it was 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central. So yeah, that could very well be a guy that commits while we're on here. Didn't even really think about that, but yeah, Smothers, another 4-star, number 9 ranked overall running back in the country, number 9 ranked prospect in the state of North Carolina. Again, this is we've sang the praises from time to time of DeMarco Murray, what he's been able to do on the recruiting circle for Oklahoma at the running back position, and it keeps he keeps on keeping on, so to speak, in terms of what he's been able to do over the last few years with Oklahoma at the running back position, and look at what they've been able to bring in this year with Gavin Sawchuk and Javante Barnes. Currently they've got Smothers gets into the role here, into the house, and in terms of that commitment in 2023. Again, just doing a really, really good job across the board. And I'm not sure if that would be enough to get Oklahoma into the top 10, but they're flirting with the top 10, I think, at this point.
Did you see the Brent Venables Big 12 media session?
Yeah, I watched bits and pieces of it. Then I've caught up with some stuff on Twitter, here, throughout the last 30 minutes or an hour. And it's just what you get from Brent Venables is always interesting. I think I'd seen something in his media session. He he's so passionate about what he talks about. He kind of gets rolling. He keeps going and going. I think they had they had time for like either 3 or 4 questions, because he kept rolling. And so he's a guy that's, you're not going to get a ton of coach speak from, right? I mean, again, very much 180 from what we've experienced at Oklahoma over the last few years with Lincoln Riley, where it's just coach speak after coach speak, and then but he'll tell you, he'll be very transparent in terms of what he's talking about. And I think when you look at this roster, and this was the one thing that I think that that was, I don't know that eye opening is the right word, Mark, but just really kind of a kind of reconfirmation of just the turnover that this team has had. He said 40% of this roster has never played it down for the University of Oklahoma. So given all the exits from last year, whether it be transfer portal, whether it be graduation, whether it be early entrance into the NFL versus how many guys Oklahoma got through the transfer portal. I don't have the number in front of me. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 or 18 kids on top of the recruiting class that they had. So it's a big change, right? I mean, it's a big it's a big change when you see almost half of your team is brand new, right? In some form or the other. So talent, obviously the talent is there, but we'll see how well that's able to kind of be put together with all the new faces coming into the fold here.
Got Jason Ray here, as we always do, talking up Oklahoma football each and every week, typically on Friday, coming your way on a Thursday, as we remind you from time to time. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live, so you can keep up with the schedule that needs to change from time to time. So before we dive into some other topics, we have talked position groups in recent weeks. We've covered the quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, so please check out those videos. And we took a poll here. Jason has also supplemented the poll, so if you would like to check out the results, I spared myself the complicated math. So you can't see the exact numbers in regards to the number of votes cast for each individual. You can only see the percentages. So just a lot of math that would have had to have gone into combining Jason's poll on Twitter with the one that I copied and placed in our community chat there. So we're looking at from last week, who will lead Oklahoma in receiving yards, and we received 710 votes here, so we appreciate you participating. In Marvin Mims, the runaway winner, at 80%, Theo Weiss at 10, Jalil Farouk at 8, and Jaden Gibson, the newcomer, with 2%. And then with rushing yardage for the 22 campaign, who will lead the Sooners on the ground, 607 votes. More of a evenly distributed, interesting poll here, with Eric Gray just edging out Marcus Major and Javante Barnes, who, of course, could feature, be a featured back and get his distribution of carries as well. Gavin Sawchuk, the talented freshman as well, just coming onto campus here recently at 7%.
Yeah, really interesting here, Mark. I mean, I think the wide receivers, from that perspective, I think you've got a pretty clear 1 and 2, not only from what the poll represents, but from my perspective as well, as Marvin Mims comes back as certainly your leading receiver, over 700 yards last year. Not a ton of scores. From a touchdown perspective, but still had over 700 yards, and I think, admittedly, probably didn't get as many targets as you would expect. With kind of what happened at the quarterback position for Oklahoma, and so you got as good as Caleb Williams was, still struggled, obviously, as you would expect as a true freshman, to read defenses and things like that to a certain degree. So obviously, I think his utilization gets ratchets up quite a bit this year. I think he's got a lot more targets. He's a guy that can that certainly can thrive in Levy's system. And then when you go back to the running back position, I think it kind of tells the story, Mark, of where Oklahoma's at, and tons of competition that you'll see in the fall camp. I think coming into fall camp, I think it's fairly consistently thought of that Eric Gray is probably going to be the RB1, but then you've got some other guys that have that opportunity. I think where you look at Marcus Major, I think he's a much better in between the tackles runner than what Eric Gray is. But I think Eric Gray will be utilized in a much different way this year. See him catching balls out of the backfield much more. So where you may see a Javante Barnes or even a Marcus Major may have more yards in terms of rushing this year. I think when you look at total yards, certainly Eric Gray will have that as the best running back out of the backfield. Wouldn't be surprised if he's anywhere between 25 and 35 catches this year from that running back position, because Levy will get that ball out to those guys out in space.
So I'm going to state the obvious in response to Web Security's question about who is the highest ceiling. So you got to think it's either Javante Barnes or Gavin Sawchuk. So unless you're going to uncover something else between those two, which route would you go?
Yeah, I would. That's a good question. Just from a longevity perspective in their career, I think Barnes is much more equipped to be able to have that higher ceiling this year. Now, next year, we'll see. But I think Barnes is putting himself in a much better position to be able to have that higher potential this year. Both of them are very, very highly recruited kids, right? When you look at Sawchuk, one of the best running backs in the country, both are top 10 running backs in the country in that 2022 class. So I think you give Barnes the benefit of the doubt based on his body type. I think he's physically ready to play this year. And the fact that, with him having a full off-season conditioning, or not really off-season, but spring to summer, strength and conditioning program under Schmitty, it'll be interesting to see how he progresses. I've heard a lot of good things, about what he's been doing. It's kind of some of the 7-on-7 stuff through the summer. So we'll see how that translates to the fall. But I think right now I would give Barnes as just a slight edge in terms of longevity and through the rest of his career.
And of course, these guys will do little without blocking up front. So those are the guys that make it all work. Jason and I have run down position groups for the past 3 weeks with quarterback, running back, wide receivers. If you've missed those videos, please check out the previous week's shows. And now on to the offensive line, which, of course, early in Lincoln Riley's tenure had been built to be one of the best, if not the best, in college football. What was the peak of that offensive line? Was it pretty much 2018-19 in terms of the development and the acquisition of talent through recruiting all coming together?
Yeah, I think so, Mark. When you look at Kyler Murray's year, I think that probably was the best offensive line that Oklahoma has had. And through, not to necessarily discredit, kind of the years before, but when you look at, I think probably 2017, 2018, 2019, I think it incrementally improved and got better. So that 2018, 2019, both of those years were probably the best. Those are years that Oklahoma averaged over 200 yards per game on the ground. Some years, and I don't have the stat in front of me, I'd have to go look it up. Sometimes they even approached the 225, 250 range. And so, it was, I think part of it has to do with a little bit of the different style of play that Oklahoma employed. When Jalen Hurts here, they ran the ball a little bit more QB run than they had under Baker and under Kyler. But yeah, and I think you've just progressively, Mark, over the last couple of years, not seen the same productivity inside that offensive line unit. So for me, this is the biggest. I think this is the biggest position group, just in terms of performance throughout the season for Oklahoma. If Oklahoma can get back to some semblance of that, to your point, those 2017, 2018, 2019 offensive line production, I think this has the opportunity to be certainly a double-digit win team, and certainly a team that is very capable of winning a Big 12 championship and possibly making it back to the playoffs. Now, if this offensive line isn't much improved over last year, then you can see some scenarios where this could be potentially a 3 or 4 loss team.
All right, Jason. Well, let's run down the personnel. Who are you looking at? Who seem to be entrenched as starters, and what does the rotation look like?
So I think, Mark, when you look at this offensive line group, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Make the comment that it's pretty well set in stone who your starting 5 are. But I feel like it is with this group. I think at the tackle positions, you're going to see Anton Harrison at the left tackle. You're going to see Wanye Morris at the right tackle position. And I think that there's a couple of things to say about those 2 kids from last year. So Anton Harrison has all the talent in the world. I think what we saw from this, and Gabe Eichert was the one that continually commented about this kind of week in and week out, really about Harrison. He has all the talent in the world, but doesn't always play hard, is a little bit lazy, doesn't have that fire. Everything that I've seen, of course, he needs to put it together in fall. Spring, he just throughout the offseason, then spring, he's just been a different type of player. Playing hard has very much been rejuvenated by kind of the coaching changes, even though his immediate coach hasn't changed a little bit more, kind of knowing that there's a lot more accountability really for him just from the head man than there has been in the past. And so I think you've seen a different guy. So it will be exciting to see if he's able to kind of take that forward into the fall. And then Wanye Morris, I think he had a lot of expectations coming in last year, Mark, from Tennessee, the 5-star. I think a lot of people just thought they could plug and play, and then he would be the next, really good left tackle, kind of in the mold of a Trent Williams, in the mold of an Orlando Brown type of guy. And he just really wasn't. Came in, had some injuries, wasn't really in the best shape that he needed to be in. Wasn't as productive as probably he needed to be, certainly last year. Again, very much in the same mold, same conversation in terms of Anton Harrison. He's in much, much better shape. Just looking at some pictures of him now versus where he was at this point last year, night and day. I think just in the shape that he looks to be in, his body looks in much better position. So I think those are probably, those are entrenched as your 2 tackles. I think a guy to keep in the back of your mind is Savion Bird. He'll be a redshirt freshman this year. Bill talked a lot about him last year, just in terms of a guy that was really, really strong, one of the strongest kids on the team. If you remember, he was a kid that was really down to SMU in Oklahoma from a recruitment perspective, and Oklahoma got not necessarily a steal, but Oklahoma was able to flip him, fairly late in that cycle a year ago. So, looking for good things out of him. Heard some just phenomenal things out of the spring, and then that's continued through the summer. One of the things about Bedenbaugh, Mark, is he does like to mix and match some of his players a little bit. So wouldn't be surprised to see them throw him in at guard a little bit, and then obviously tackle. So he's a guy. I don't know that necessarily he'll be a starter. Could certainly work his way to that point, depending on how he performs in fall camp. But certainly a guy that has the ability to play a lot on this offensive line. And then when you kind of move into the guard position, I think at right guard, Chris Murray is a guy that there was a little bit of a discussion whether or not he would come back. The UCLA transfer, he will be back for Oklahoma this year, and a guy that's pretty dependable at that right guard. He's got a little bit smaller arms than you would like from a guard's perspective, being able in terms of his reach, but plays hard. Really strong. He's a guy that what you're going to get out of him. So I don't really see any, and honestly at the guard position doesn't have a ton of competition, from my mind for that spot. So, and then the other left guard the left guard position. I like McCade Matower, the transfer from Cal, 3-year starter at Cal, came in here. Oklahoma went through the spring ball. I think he's a guy that will get that starting nod. Another kid that's in the conversation is Bray Walker. Talked about him quite a bit. He came in as a 5-star in the state of Oklahoma, a guy that a lot of people thought would do a lot of good things. Would be more of an impact player. He hit the portal this year and then came back. So, I don't know. I don't know if he didn't get the offers that he liked. I don't know if it was a situation where some of these other schools just had lack of tape on him, didn't really, know what they would get out of him just because of the lack of playing time that he's had thus far. But I think, probably no other kid has had a better opportunity to learn from Schmitty just in terms of that strength. Did some strength tests, and he turned out to be the strongest offensive lineman on the team. So I think I think where he's traditionally struggled is kind of understanding the offense and really the overall scheme, and where obviously his position relates to where he needs to get to in terms of the blocking assignments. Those are, I think, with Levy's system, those are much more simplified than they've been in the past. So from a positive perspective, but on the negative side, Oklahoma's going to go so fast that he's got to be in incredible shape. Obviously, all these guys are, but I think specifically a guy like him, who's probably the biggest one. Haven't seen the summer weights yet, but he's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 320, 330. So has to be in really good shape to be able to do that. And then lastly, at the center position, I think this is probably, Mark, for me, the only spot where you could potentially see a couple of guys be the starter. I still like Andrew Rame. I like what he brings to the position. I like his, his versatility, his athletic ability, his elusiveness that he has to be able to play that position. I think what he's done, what he needs to do better at is his strength. His strength at the point of attack. He got from time really just in terms of just across the board. He would have his good moments and bad moments, but there would be some moments where he would get pushed around a little bit. So frankly, it was a little disappointing. And I know you can't help injuries. He was banged up a little bit through the spring, so didn't really get the time that he probably needed there. So really huge for him to have a big summer. And then I think that the other guy that played quite a bit last year, split time at the center position with Robert Congle. He's a transfer from Arizona. Has been here. I think he's very consistent in terms of what he'll give you. You know what you're going to get out of him. Plays hard, really strong kid, but doesn't have quite the same movement. Doesn't have quite the same athletic ability that Andrew Rame has. So if you see Congle, I mean, he'll play just from a rotational perspective, certainly. But if you see the bulk of the snaps go to Congle, I think it's where you see that that Rame hasn't taken that next step, just from a strength perspective and just being what he needs to be. And this is what I'll say. I talked about the importance of the offensive line overall, but I do think that Oklahoma has a with Jerry Schmidt coming back in the fold for Oklahoma from a strength and conditioning, I think this group is the group that gets impacted in a positive way more than any other group on this team, offensively or defensively. So it'll be interesting to see how they come together and play. They were much improved in the spring over what they were even last year at this time. So it'll be, again, as I mentioned, I think it's the key component to this football team overall, particularly specifically on the offensive side of the ball, but overall as well.
With the Cal and TCU additions that you mentioned, according to Phil Steele, Oklahoma has 125 career starts coming back on the offensive line. It seems a little high, but anyway.
Well, I think the one thing that you have to consider when you look at McCade Mattower, I think he brings that wealth of experience that kind of, I think that plays into that role of the starting experience, because I mean, to your point, probably not the same in terms of experience on this, existing teams from last year, but then when you bring in a 3-year starter from Cal in that fold, I think that that helps, that experience factor. And the one guy that I haven't really talked about a little bit was Marcus Hicks, very highly recruited kid on the defensive side of the ball, has moved over to the offensive side. Was a guy that was just kind of learning the position last year. Now he's had a full year at that tackle position, just to see where he lands. I think from some of the things that I've heard is his dad would not have allowed him to move from defense to offense for any other offensive lineman, for any other offensive line in the coach, except for the one that Oklahoma has right here. So I think there's a lot of trust in him getting to where he needs to be. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what his progression looks like and where he falls into that too deep.
Phil Steele's publication has Oklahoma listed with the best offensive line in the Big 12, number 8 in the country. Athlon's is going with Baylor, number 1 in the Big 12, and Oklahoma, number 2, is how it stacks up for those two on the offensive front. And Anton Harrison is the one player on the offensive line, at least according to Athlon, selected to the second team All Big 12, and he's the only one on the top 3 All Big 12 teams on the offensive line. So let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, Mark. I think when you look at it, Baylor has probably the best, the best offensive line returning. And I think the proof's in the pudding, so to speak. Oklahoma's not performed as well as really they need to over the last couple of years. So I think it's critical that they take that next step. So I think a lot of things that we've heard is that there's a difference, obviously in the strength and conditioning, but I think the one thing that kind of goes a little bit understated, Mark, but the fact that what Jeff Levy brings to the position outside of being a really good play caller, having successful offenses, but he's an offensive line guy, right? I mean, he played offensive line at Oklahoma. He knows the position really, really well. So, it's like having another offensive line coach, kind of obviously a little bit different from Riley. Riley was more of a quarterback guru. So you think that there would be, that added benefit there from the quarterback room. So Oklahoma should see that added benefit on the other side, of the ball, in terms of the offensive line. So I think those three things coupled together with Beanbo and Jerry Schmidt, and then certainly Levy having his understanding. He understands the offense at that, obviously at that level, to know where every offensive lineman needs to be going, needs to be getting to, and what they're trying to accomplish. So I think absolutely that should should equate to a much better offensive line performance this year.
Gash Blitz, appreciate you being here. So Anton Harrison, we talked about him being the one preseason all-conference performer. Is he supposed to have that kind of upside to be a possible NFL player?
Yeah, I think Mark, he has all the measurables that you would like out of an offensive lineman. He has the size, he has the athletic ability. I think his is, I think it's a little bit mental, just in terms of making sure that he, has that high motor. He plays hard all the time. He, has a just more in-depth buy-in, I think, in terms of the position and understanding, that absolutely he can do that. And he can be a really great player for this team. I mean, you think typically you want your best, wide. Sorry, I got wide receiver on the brain. You want your best guy at the left tackle. I mean, maybe it's a little bit different with Dylan Gabriel being a left-hander. So you've got Wanye Morris kind of protecting his blind side, so to speak. But I think just in general, I think he's a guy that probably currently has the most upside. I think Wanye Morris could get there, but I think Anton Harrison has the most upside of anyone.
Jake Taylor and Jacob Sexton are the two prized recruits out of the 2022 class. Probably not going to see much out of them, but both top 15 to 20 offensive tackles in the country in the 22 class to be looking out for down the line. 904 Hurricane, appreciate you being here. We have addressed the Smothers announcement coming up soon. So we'll see if that drops. I will keep a lookout for that.
Yep, I'm doing the same thing. I haven't seen anything come across yet, but he's supposed to be announcing live on his Instagram account. But haven't heard anything yet. But I will keep tabs on that.
Carvin Jackson says Bill Biedenbaugh has not produced a dominant offensive line since 2017-18. We talked about that. Linemen are too fat. Need to get in the weight room. Power up. Robert Congle is far more ready to play center.
So I mean, I can agree with some of that. I think part of the problem was I think part of the problem was I think maybe almost the opposite of what the comment was here, just in terms of them being too light from time to time, and really just not being on the same page with Lincoln Riley and then Benny Wiley in terms of the strength and conditioning. And so, I mean, I think you've already seen the difference, and you absolutely will continue to see that difference, throughout the coming years. And I think it'll showcase itself. I think this year, and I think that the comment really about Conjo kind of remains to be seen, right? I mean, I think if you see more Conjo at center, you're not seeing the best potential player at that position. I'm not saying that it won't happen. I'm just saying that if you see that there's just not a lot of belief that Rame has done everything that he needs to do, kind of in the weight room and things like that. So I think this is you have a high level of trust in what Biedenbaugh has done throughout his career. He didn't all of a sudden just forget how to coach offensive line in the last couple of years, and so I think the combination of those three will still prove to be an improvement. How much do they improve? I mean, I think that remains to be seen.
Weston agrees with you. I don't think so, bro. They were getting too small and not building enough muscle mass. Our guy 28AD28, good to see you here. Schmitty's presence should go a long way toward getting the offensive line in proper shape to perform. Focus and discipline should be better this season. Yeah, hopefully we get that announcement. That would be nice. before we sign off? We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm on his Instagram and still haven't seen anything even go live yet. So we'll keep looking at that. But as we pivot here to the talking about the recruiting side, so there's a couple, and then we can obviously answer any questions that's out there. But a couple of guys to kind of keep in mind, throughout the rest of the month. In terms of recruiting announcements. I mean, tomorrow, Jaden Greathouse, 4-star wide receiver out of Austin, number 17 ranked wide receiver in the country, is committing tomorrow. High school teammate of Jackson Arnold. I think right now, don't be surprised if it's Notre Dame. I think right now, but I do wouldn't be surprised if this is something that Oklahoma continues to work on, and Jackson Arnold himself works on flipping. So even if Oklahoma doesn't get the commitment tomorrow, which I don't expect, we'll continue to monitor that as a guy that could potentially flip. Peyton Kirkland, 4-star offensive lineman out of Florida, Orlando. This is probably honestly, and just looking at and hearing and just what I've been able to gather from some of the recruiting experts, one of the most bizarre recruiting situations in some time, and really kind of bizarre in terms of being tight-lipped. Like, this kid's committing, I think on the 23rd of July, so a little bit more than a week, and nobody really knows what he's thinking. No one knows what he's doing. I mean, Michigan State, Miami, Florida, Oklahoma are all in the mix. If I had to say something, I think it's probably trending Michigan State or Miami right now, but I mean, who really knows? So that's one to keep an eye on. I um, wouldn't really hold your, really kind of hold your breath on him, but something that if Oklahoma is able to get him, they're probably done. From an offensive line perspective, they've already got 4. If they get one more, that's in the neighborhood of what they were targeting this year, 4 to 5 guys. And so he's one to keep an eye on. Troy Bowles, 4-star linebacker out of Tampa, Florida, number 2 ranked linebacker in the country. We've talked a little bit about him. He is probably there's three. He's got a final 3 of Georgia, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. It looks very, very positive for Georgia right now. Oklahoma's still in the mix. You never know in the recruiting game, but I think he's pretty heavily Georgia right now. So there's some thoughts about Oklahoma maybe just kind of being a hat on the table. But even if Oklahoma loses out on this, these are battles that Oklahoma's not been in as of recent at the linebacker position and at really key players. And then the last one that I'll talk about here is Derek LeBlanc. And certainly, if there's any questions about any specific recruits, we can talk through them. But Derek LeBlanc, 6'4", 270, defensive lineman out of Kissimmee, Florida. He's going to announce on the 28th. I think it's very, very positively trending towards Oklahoma. He's probably Oklahoma's not really got any defensive linemen in the class as of yet. A couple of edge guys, but no true defensive linemen. And so this is a guy that's, like I said, very much trending in Oklahoma's direction. At one point, this looked to be a Florida get, but I think it's really starting to go towards Oklahoma's direction right now. And so he would be a guy that probably translates to moving inside in Oklahoma's scheme. Top 100 overall nationally, number 77, I believe he ranks number 7 ranked defensive lineman in the country. And then of course there's always questions about David Hicks, and I think we talked about him last week. Can make an argument he's the best overall player in the country. And I mean, let's forget about there's so much conversation about Arch Manning being the Is he really the best player overall, or is he where is he at? I think David Hicks is probably a better prospect than Arch is, but I think there's not a whole lot of information on Hicks. I would say right now Oklahoma and A&M are probably right there in terms of leaders for him, but he's not anywhere near as far along in the discussion. In terms of making an announcement, I would be surprised if he's not a December announcement in some form or fashion. It could even wait to the second, the late signing period. But Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma likes where they're at right now, so I think he's a guy that that Oklahoma will remain in on. Especially Oklahoma, there's probably about 5 or 6, maybe even 7 targets that Oklahoma feels pretty good about on the defensive line. They've just not gotten there. It's just not as far along in their recruitment, just in terms of the announcements and things like that. So don't be alarmed by Oklahoma's kind of lack of commitments thus far on the defensive line. It'll come. It's just those kids are more, like I said, they're more kind of in line with later announcements.
David Hicks, yeah, his score is almost perfect on the 247 Sports Composite. He is the top-rated player in the state of Texas, the top-rated defensive lineman, Katy, Texas. Yes, we diced up the scouting report and the profile on David Hicks last week, so please check that out. And yes, Texas A&M apparently in the lead right now out of 39 offers. And David Hicks here just over the past month has visited Oregon, Texas A&M, Miami, and Michigan State. 88 tackles last year, 22 tackles for loss, 13 sacks this past season. So there it is.
Yep. He's the crown jewel, I think, for many people, but I think obviously Oklahoma, but I think he's he's sorry, I was just kind of laughing at that last comment. There's been in the Oklahoma circle, Mark, there's so much conversation about this kid, and talked about this a little bit on a show that I was on last night with some local people. It's almost, Mark, one of those things where it's so unfair to this kid, because the moment he steps on campus, Texas or wherever he goes, the expectations are going to be absolutely through the roof. According to 247 Composite, he is a perfect 1.000 recruit. Unless that's changed, he is the number 1 player in the country, number 1 quarterback in the country, and one of the highest ranked players ever. Right there, kind of behind Vince Young and even Quinn Ewers a couple of years ago. So the problem is, and this, Mark, this is just me watching film. I certainly understand. This is where Peyton went. This is where Eli went. But he's just watching the film. He doesn't look to be anywhere near as good as the way he's being measured out to be. Now, if what you're saying is you're having this kid as the number 1, just from a recruiting service perspective, this kid's the number 1 overall player in the country. If you're saying he's the number 1 overall player in the country with the total package that he brings, meaning just by the name, kids are going to go to Texas just to play with a Manning, right? I mean, that name means a lot in the in that recruiting circle and the just overall teams and stuff like that. But just overall player, I think, me personally, I think a lot of Oklahoma people like where Oklahoma is with Jackson Arnold versus an Arch Manning. But I mean, it's just like I said, it's sad for the kid, because he's got unrealistic expectations from day one. that he hits the campus.
Yeah, the unreal expectations start with his grandfather and then his two uncles. So even if he wasn't rated that high, he if he wins 2 Super Bowls, he's he's just he's just another guy in the family. He's just the third guy that's won 2 Super Bowls. So just let that sink in, anybody out there that so yeah, it's difficult to imagine that even the best scout could also take the level of competition that he's competing against and evaluate him to be to have a perfect score.
Yeah, no,
I guess
it's
I would
it's
tend to
hard.
think, let's say a David Hicks, let's say David Hicks was stuck up somewhere in New Hampshire, somewhere where he wasn't playing against anybody that wasn't anywhere close to him, but he was participating in all sorts of camps where you could measure just the sheer size, strength, speed, explosion off the line, all that, and just say, okay, well, this is what he is. He's a freak athlete, and we projected that he's demolishing people, and he would do this even against better competition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I'm not a scout. I just watch a lot of football, and Arch Manning's numbers aren't even. They're good. They're not outstanding.
Well, and here's the other thing. I mean, I think a lot of people take away from his state championship performance last year. I think he was in the neighborhood of 6 of 18, 6 of 19, 47 yards, and a big time loss. But I think the other thing that people keep in the back of their mind is at these Elite 11 or these camps, like he doesn't go, like he doesn't go and he doesn't throw in these camps. So I heard I heard someone else make the comparison that like if you're not willing to if you're not willing to go, and there's a reason why, like you're not going to these camps and you're not throwing, is the reason why are you just afraid of what teams are going to see or what these scouts are going to see in person? What's the reason other than an injury that that you don't that you're not able to throw? So I think that's just kind of the $1 million question.
Yeah, and the competitor's mentality would be that regardless of your position, if you're a competitor and you want to compete against the best and show yourself to be the best, but specifically a quarterback, that if 2 years from now you're going to be leading a game-winning drive in Tuscaloosa or Death Valley or somewhere for Texas, then you shouldn't have any issue with throwing the football around in shorts and a t-shirt in front of some scouts. If you're going to be looking down the gun barrel at the Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M defenses in conference play here in a couple of years, or ultimately, looking down the gun barrel of an NFL defense in a playoff game or something throwing for scouts should not intimidate you in any such way, and you would want to show and prove who you are. The other thing is that it just fits. It fits the name. It fits the narrative. It fits the family lineage of being the number one quarterback in the country. But if he's the 15th rated quarterback in the country, he still can go almost anywhere he wants. Even
Yeah.
let's say this evaluation is way off, but he's still really good. And again, go to any year, anybody, and look up the top 15 quarterbacks in the country. You can find plenty of tremendous quarterbacks who rank 12th, 15th, 18th, anything like that, and ended up having tremendous careers. I'm having a hard time with understanding. Maybe he is that good, or if there's an artificial boost to his ranking, then why, I guess, to sell magazines or get clicks.
Yeah, no, I guess so. It's hard to understand, but I mean, we'll find out sooner or later. Yeah, but I mean, there's got to be some underlying reason why.
Yeah, and it's being mentioned in the chat, and we see it all the time. He's not the inventor of ducking out of running a 40 or anything like that when you're an elite prospect and just coming to the determination that what do you have to gain? You only have to lose. You only have the downside of a poor performance, a bad day. So I get it.
Yep.
Okay. All right, everyone. We appreciate you being here for Sooners Live at a different time this week. Please hit the like button. Share these videos out on social media. You can also just let people know that we're here every week talking Oklahoma football, typically on Friday. But this week, we moved it up to Thursday. So we appreciate everybody. Seems like everybody was able to catch up here pretty quick with 160 online. So thank you so much for that. All right, Jason. Well, appreciate you being here. Have yourself a great weekend.
Yep. You do the same. Thanks, Mark.
All right, everyone. See you back next week.